Bremont that we're looking at today is a brand that I've never really warmed to. And this isn't just me saying it for clickbait. If you've been a fan of the channel, if you've listened to the podcast and the live streams, you'll know that I have never been a real fan of Bremont. They've done a couple of marketing missteps over the years. I have to say though that this watch has changed my opinion, and not because they sent it me for free or anything. I bought this with my own money. They have done a lot of good things though, to be honest. I will give them credit. They do a military discount for people that have served in the armed forces. Now, there are certain things even after owning this one for 6 weeks that I will say, and one of them is that I do not think that these are worth their retail value. I've reviewed hundreds of watches, so I think I've got a good idea of what to me represents value, and I don't think that these are good value at their retail price. I can also say that because I didn't pay retail for this, even though I bought this watch new. So watch we're looking at today is the S302, one of their newer models. It is using their 300-meter dive watch platform. I know that there's a few of you that are itching in the comments. You're being compelled by the horological gods to type out that this isn't a dive watch because it has a GMT bezel. Bremont call it a dive watch. It is in their C family of watches, so I will refer to it as a dive watch in this review because that's what they call it. This is a 40mm and it's using Bremont's Trip-Tick case, which basically means the case is in 3 sections. If we look at it at the side here, you've got that black inner core, and then we have the case back, and then of course the outer surround, which also incorporates the lugs. Most watches don't have this central core to them, but what I will say is this really is an extremely comfortable watch to wear. The way that the lugs are designed and how they've rounded the lugs off on the side and they've chamfered them means that it is extremely wearable. I was surprised at how comfortable this watch is. With it being a 40mm watch, it wears very well here on my 7.2-inch wrist. The overall dimensions of this watch are a 40mm case, 49 from lug to lug, 13mm thickness, which is pretty incredible for a 300-meter dive watch. When you've seen me review watches with 20mm lug widths in the past, you've always heard me say 20mm is great because there's the most choice for straps. This is one of the first negatives to this watch. I bought it on the bracelet. I'm flashing it up here on a Velcro strap. I bought it on the bracelet. We'll talk about that secondary and the reason why I've not got it on the bracelet, and I've mainly been wearing it on this Velcro strap. But one of the unfortunate things with this Trip-Tick case is that the spring bars are so close to the actual watch. I've had to buy curved spring bars in order to get NATO style straps on it because there is just such a tight tolerance between the spring bar and the case. So what that does unfortunately mean is you can't swap this out easily to a rubber strap like a Tropic, for example. It also means that if you want to wear it on a leather, you have to have one that'll accept curved end bars. And that's a real shame because I think this would look awesome on a whole variety of different straps. I personally think they should make a beads of rice for this. I think that would really tighten in the whole look as well. The watch is using Bremont's BE932 AV movement, which is basically an ETA 2893-2. They do a little bit of extra work to the movement. Balance wheel's been upgraded and also the mainspring has been upgraded as well. It does have chronometer written on the dial, which confused me because I thought that chronometers were all COSC certified, or that in order to say you were chronometer, it had to have been measured by COSC, but apparently that's not the case. This has been measured to an ISO standard 3159. I'm sure there's a lot of you watching this that know a lot more about this than me, but I think it just measures that the movement is consistent in the way that it's timed, and it consistently runs over, I think, 16 days or something. Whereas COSC does a lot of additional measurements, one of which is a timing variance. The additional function of this watch is that it's a GMT. Now, this is what you would call an office GMT, and what that means is that the GMT hand itself independently moves, commonly referred to as an office GMT because you can move the GMT to different time zones whilst not disrupting the main 3 hands of the dial. It also means that this one has a quick set date. One of the things that immediately drew me to this watch is of course the color scheme. Whichever designer came up with doing a green and a blue, 10 out of 10 because the colors, the shades that they've used of these colors work perfectly together and really draws the eye to the watch. They do have another version which has a fauxtina and a grey on, which I also did like the look of, but the only thing that put me off that was the fauxtina forced aging that they've added to the lume. This doesn't have that. This has crisp white lume against that beautiful matte navy blue dial, and then green, and there's also several pops of orange on the GMT hand. We have Supermarine in orange, and then also London is in orange, as well as the 60, 15, 45. Just adds a lot of visual interest, a lot of pop of color, and that's ultimately what drew me to this watch. The crown is also very nicely proportioned, easy to grip inlay of their propeller logo. Overall, I love the design of the dial. I'm a big fan of the hands, sword style hands. They're sort of mixture between a sword and a syringe type hand. I'm sure there's a proper name for them, but very legible. It has the date as well, although the date is really tight in that window.
So it's not all sunshine and rainbows about the dial, and I made a bold statement at the start saying that I don't think these watches are worth their RRP, and a lot of that is to do with the dial. So let's just revisit the date window. This is what appears to be a color-coded date window, but as is probably quite obvious from these macro shots, the date window is a different shade than the dial. This really gives an odd visual to the dial. Color-coded date wheel usually gives the visual that the date is hovering or almost invisible on the dial, but here, because the color is slightly off, it gives a weird look to the date. I think perhaps they should have worked a little bit harder to get this color-coded to the dial color, or maybe even left it white. The other thing is the lume on this is really poor for a watch in this price range. You'd get a better visual from lume on a Seiko watch in the several $100 price range. The lume on here, as we can see, there's differences between the indices and the hands here, and also it fades quite fast, which I think is pretty unforgivable for a dive watch. But the number one issue on this, and why I don't think these watches are worth their RRP, is the overall quality control. You've probably noticed on some of these macro shots that it looks like I haven't cleaned the dial, that I haven't used my processes to get the dust off. The truth is that this dust is on the underside of the crystal. As you'll see here, I'm trying to use the tip of a pen to show you that this dust isn't on the top of the dial, it's on the underside, which for a watch in this price range, over $4,000, that's a really poor show.
Let's talk about the packaging very briefly, because it comes in an amazing watch roll. And they've used the buckle and tang from the watch straps as the closure for the watch roll. But one of the cool things about this, it does have a stash compartment in there. So in this case, I've got the bracelet in here, and it also comes with a strap changing tool. I'll leave that to your imagination, but there's a little stash area inside the watch roll, and it's made from a very nice leather. If I was going to buy this watch again, I think I would buy it on the rubber strap, because I think that looks the best, and I might try and buy this rubber strap aftermarket. They don't make it available on their website, but I've left a message with the boutique in New York, so hopefully I can buy this extra. So what don't I like about the bracelet? The main issue with the bracelet is it's just too chunky for the watch's design. It is 20 mil, but it's 20 mil all the way down. It doesn't taper. The Bremont clasp is nicely milled, but it has this flat piece as part of the milling. I don't know why they've done that. Adds to the chunkiness. There is no on-the-fly micro adjust, which I think is pretty unforgivable in this price range, to be quite honest. The ability to quickly notch out bracelets back and forth depending on if your wrist swells is a huge advantage, and I think that's a big miss for this bracelet as well. So overall, I'm not a huge fan. It is finished very well. It does give a good look to the watch, but I wish it tapered. I wish that clasp was a little bit more refined, and maybe there was some micro adjust on the clasp as well, because I think in its current state for a 40mm watch like this, it's just a bit of a chunk. It just adds a lot of extra chunkiness to the watch that I don't think it benefits from. As I alluded to at the start, I didn't pay full retail for this. The watch is retail for $4,200. Now, I bought this on a cruise ship, so I saved the tax savings there anyway, so I would have paid exactly $4,200, but I did negotiate with them, and I ended up getting it down to around $3,750 is what I ended up paying for it. There is a little bit of wiggle room that some of these ADs have. Bremont is popular, but it's not so popular that they can afford to rigidly stick to their RRP prices, is the impression that I've got. So I'm really interested to know what you think in the comment section down below. Unless your comment is to do with the GMT bezel, of course. Leave a comment, love it if you're subscribed, and give a thumbs up to the video, and I'll see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews.